Why would a nation with its own parliament, its own traditions and its own fiercely guarded independence suddenly agree to dissolve its government and hand its future over to its neighbour? In 1707, Scotland did exactly that. But why? And what did it mean for the people who lived through it? I want you to picture Edinburgh in the early 1700s. The city was alive with gossip, tavern whispers and loud debates on streets. And our companion through this story is a merchant named Andrew Kerr, a composite figure based on records of Scottish traders and town burghers. Andrew sells cloth and imported wine from France. He has a keen sense of pride in Scotland's independence, but he also knows painfully well that Scottish trade has been struggling. His shelves are never as full as he'd like, and his purse never as heavy as the merchants of London. Now here's a real question that would dominate Andrew's life and that of every Scot. Should Scotland remain proudly independent, or should it tie its fortunes to England, even if that meant losing its parliament? But before we can answer that, we need to ask, why was Scotland in such a vulnerable position by 1707? Scotland entered the 18th century facing a crisis. Its economy was fragile, its harvests unreliable, and its population often at the mercy of famine. But the breaking point came with the Darien scheme, Scotland's grand but disastrous attempt to establish a colony in Panama in the 1690s. Thousands invested, from wealthy nobles to small-town merchants like Andrew. And when the colony collapsed in disease and failure, Scotland was financially ruined. England, meanwhile, had its eyes fixed on European wars and the succession crisis after the death of Queen Anne's heir. The two kingdoms had been united under one monarch since 1603, when James VI of Scotland became James I of England. But the crowns were united, not the parliaments. Each kingdom still had its own government, and this left a dangerous gap. So how could they secure stability and avoid being pulled apart by foreign powers or by their own rivalries? For England, the solution was simple: bring Scotland formally into the fold. England feared that an independent Scotland might side with France, their great Catholic rival, in the looming war of the Spanish succession. So England made an offer that Scottish merchants like Andrew could hardly ignore. Join the Union and you'll have full access to England's vast and growing colonial trade. No more being shut out of the riches of the Americas. No more exclusion from the powerful English East India Company. But was it a genuine partnership or more of a bribe? Many Scots thought so. Some even whispered of corruption in the Edinburgh Parliament, members being bought with promises of titles, pensions and London wealth. So was the union freely chosen, or was it forced by desperation and money? In 1707, the Scottish Parliament voted itself out of existence. On paper, this was voluntary. In practice, it was bitterly contested. Crowds protested outside the Parliament House. Pamphlets railed against the end of Scotland. Ordinary people like Andrew were torn. Prosperity might beckon, but the loss of sovereignty was a deep wound. One eyewitness described women throwing insults and worse at MPs as they walked into the chamber. The poet Robert Burns, later in the century, would call the deal a parcel of rogues in the nation. But the vote carried, and on the 1st of May 1707, the Kingdom of Great Britain was born. For Andrew, that meant new possibilities. His trade links to London began to grow. He could send ships abroad under the protection of the Royal Navy, yet deep down, he still felt something had been lost. Did ordinary Scots gain more than they lost, or was its sovereignty too high a price to pay? For many Scots, the Union brought slow but real benefits. Glasgow's merchants, especially in tobacco, grew immensely wealthy. Scotland's Enlightenment thinkers, David Hume, Adam Smith, helped shape the modern world. Scottish regiments fought across the empire. But resentment never vanished. Jacobite uprisings in 1715 and 1745, aiming to restore the exiled Stuarts, were fuelled in part by anger at the Union. Ordinary people still sang songs of Scotland betrayed. Andrew, had he lived to see the 45, might have found his loyalty stretched to breaking. And yet the longer the Union endured, the more it shaped a new identity, British. Scots could be Scots and British, even if uneasily. If the Union created prosperity, why does its legitimacy remain contested even today? Fast forward to today, and the Acts of Union remain the foundation of the United Kingdom. The Parliament at Westminster still governs under the authority created in 1707. But the cracks are visible. In 1999, Scotland regained its own Parliament, not independent but devolved. And in 2014, Scotland held a referendum on whether to leave the Union altogether. The vote was no, but the margin was close. And Andrew's dilemma of 1707 is still alive in Scotland's politics. Do the benefits of union outweigh the costs? And that brings us to today's reflection. The Acts of Union were not simply a political bargaining of the 18th century. They set in motion debates about sovereignty, prosperity and identity that still resonate across Britain today. When I think of Andrew Kerr, I imagine him standing in Edinburgh in May 1707, torn between pride in his nation and hope for his family's future. That tension between identity and opportunity still runs through the story of Britain. Thank you for walking a little further down the road that made Britain with me. The story winds on. Try this one. I think you'll like it. Until then, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you very soon.